Welcome back to the Catalyst and the Cup. You're tuned into Wi-Fi, where we find the signal in the noise. I definitely need this coffee before we start our topic today. I'm Navya, a creative strategist who focuses on the vision, even when vision feels like Bangalore's Monday morning fog.
I really hope that's a dark roast you have there. I'm Akash, a technical lead managing the unglamorous plumbing behind the AI curtain.
It is indeed a dark roast today because my clients are blinded by FOMO. They want generative AI magic, but I'm worried about the budget running dry before we even launch.
Yeah, because right now, most people aren't building the future. They're just buying a Ferrari to deliver groceries in silkboard traffic.
I mean, that analogy is just so painfully accurate. You see these massive companies throwing completely unreasonable amounts of money at artificial intelligence, right? And they just assume it will fix every single workflow issue they have.
Oh, absolutely. It is a fundamental misallocation of resources. People are treating these highly complex predictive models like they are simple magic wands.
Right. And that leads us perfectly into the core of our discussion today. We are unpacking some really fascinating insights from a guide called Why You Need a Decision Matrix for AI by Wi-Fi.
It is a brilliant framework. It forces you to stop looking at AI as a monolithic solution and start breaking it down into distinct categories of intelligence.
Well, before we get into the matrix itself, we have to talk about the horror story they used to set the stakes. Because this is what happens when you get it wrong. They call it the generative butterfly effect.
Yes, the document migration disaster. That story should be mandatory reading for every executive who wants to buy an AI subscription.
Literally. So look at it this way. Imagine a huge insurance giant. They have thousands upon thousands of these old legacy policy documents, and they need to migrate all of them into a brand new digital system.
And we need to be very clear about the nature of these documents.
Yeah.
These are strict, legally binding contracts. They are not creative writing pieces.
Exactly. I mean, spot on. They're full of these very simple, standardized clauses, like a 24-month exclusion period.
Right. And a 24-month exclusion period is a deterministic fact. It is a binary reality. It is either 24 months or it isn't. You cannot debate it.
But the engineering team in this story, they were just completely swept up in the hype. They decided that standard data transfer was too boring. They wanted the new system to sound, professional and conversational.
Which is where the absolute absurdity begins. To achieve that conversational tone, they deployed a multi-agent generative swarm.
A swarm for a data migration.
It is mind-boggling because generative AI is probabilistic. It doesn't actually know facts. It just predicts the most mathematically likely next word. So they took a hard, fixed legal parameter and fed it to these highly advanced agents.
And the butterfly flaps its wings because the agents start collaborating. Right. They're talking to each other, debating how to summarize a rule that requires literally zero summarization.
They got stuck in a recursive loop. They kept passing this tiny fragment of text back and forth, iterating on the quote-unquote vibe of the legal clause.
It is just wild to think about. They burned through their entire quarterly GPU budget in a matter of weeks. Millions of computational cycles, thousands of dollars completely evaporated.
All of that energy, just to give a simple truth, a professional coat of paint. And do you remember the punchline? The actual output they generated after all that?
I do. The final summarized output for that highly specific clause was standard exclusionary periods apply.
They completely obscured the actual 24-month rule. They paid a massive premium to use a predictive tool to basically erase a deterministic fact.
And the most frustrating part is that a simple free keyword search, literally just hitting Control-F for the number 24, would have solved the whole thing.
A free search would have been flawless, but they chose the Ferrari for the grocery run, and it crashed it.
So the big question is, how do we shield ourselves from this? If you are listening right now and you manage projects or budgets, or you just want to build good tools, how do you catch these low-level leaks before they drain your bank account?
You have to make a fundamental shift in your thinking. You have to move from simply prompting to actual architecting. And that is where the decision matrix comes in.
The blueprint reality. You have to categorize the work.
Precisely. You assign each task to the appropriate level of intelligence based on a specific test. If we want to stop the butterfly effect, we have to start at the absolute foundation, the first level of the matrix, the coder.
The coder. This represents plain code, right? The intelligence of the absolute record.
Yes. The coder operates entirely on fixed, non-negotiable logic. You use this when you're dealing with an arithmetic reality. So, we apply the math test. Is the task asking for an unshakable truth? If yes, you use the coder.
And the beautiful thing about this level is the reliability. I love the metaphor of the train tracks here.
It is a great way to visualize it. A train on a track lacks the freedom to explore the forest. It cannot innovate. But because it is rigidly locked to those tracks, it is entirely safe.
Yeah.
It will never deviate from its path.
Or think about a simple kitchen timer. When you twist that dial to 600 seconds, it doesn't try to predict if your cake is burning. It doesn't care if the phone rings. It just counts exactly 600 seconds and then it rings.
Because it doesn't possess a mind. It is purely mechanism. And that gives you an instant reflex. It is completely blind to context, which makes it practically free to run. The cost is $0.
But, and this is a really important caveat, that fixed logic is also its biggest weakness. It suffers from logical blindness.
Absolutely. It has zero common sense. It only executes the exact rules it was given.
This brings to mind that classic developer joke from the guide. It perfectly captures this flaw. So an engineer is heading to the grocery store and his wife says, "Get a bag of milk. If they have eggs, get a dozen."
And he comes home an hour later carrying 13 bags of milk.
Yes. It is so funny, but it is also a perfect illustration. When his wife asks why on earth he bought 13 bags of milk, he just looks at her and says, "Because they had eggs."
The variables shifted, and the coder executed the script with flawless, absolute fidelity. The syntax was perfect, but the real-world outcome was completely absurd.
Because plain code cannot interpret human intent. It just follows the literal instructions.
Which means the coder becomes entirely useless the moment your environment becomes messy or unpredictable.
Right. So what happens when life doesn't run on perfect train tracks? What if we need a system that can actually adapt to our habits?
That is when we move to the second level of the matrix, the detective. This is traditional machine learning. It represents the intelligence of inference.
So at this stage, we are applying the habit test. We stop writing rigid if-then rules, and we start looking for patterns.
Yes. You use the detective when the answer you need is buried in past data. It stops hard-coding logic and starts training on exceptions. And the cost to run this is still incredibly low, around 1,000th of a cent per query.
A smart thermostat is a perfect analogy for this. If you install one in your house, you don't really program it. It just sits there and watches you.
It gathers clues. It notices that every Monday morning you wake up at 7 and turn the heat up. But on Saturday, you sleep in, so the heat stays off until 9.
It is recognizing patterns. It acts like a seasoned investigator looking at footprints in the dirt, inferring where you've been so it can guess what you will do next.
It is fantastic for maintaining flow. It anticipates your needs based entirely on historical probabilities. But, just like the coder, the detective has a fatal structural flaw.
Oh, the rear view mirror syndrome. This is such a frustrating limitation.
It is. The detective suffers from massive prediction lag. Because it only knows what has already happened, it is always looking backward.
I literally just dealt with this. I downloaded this new AI fitness app that claimed it would intuitively learn my running schedule. So I lace up my fuse, I step outside, and I start my run.
Let me guess, it didn't realize you were running until you were already exhausted.
Exactly that. I am a full mile down the road. My phone's GPS clearly shows I am moving at 10 miles per hour, and only then does the app send me a notification saying, "It looks like you're going for a run. Would you like to track it?"
It is a detective confidently claiming to have solved the mystery while standing over the suspect who is already in handcuffs.
It completely misses the point of anticipating an action.
And that happens because the detective is utterly tethered to past data. If you behave in a completely unprecedented way, or if the market conditions shift overnight, it is useless. It cannot imagine a future it hasn't seen in its training data.
Which brings us to the really exciting part, the part everyone is talking about right now. Because if the detective only knows the past, how do we generate something entirely new?
We apply the creation test. Does the task require something that fundamentally does not exist yet? If the answer is yes, we graduate to the third level, the artist.
This is generative AI, large language models, the intelligence of imagination.
Yes. This is where we introduce creative synthesis. You invite the artist to the table when you need to combine existing concepts in completely novel ways.
Think about a jazz musician. They aren't reading strict sheet music like the coder. They are taking the underlying theory and improvising, creating a melody that has never been played before.
Or think about a highly stressed family dinner planner. You have a very specific set of constraints. You have a picky toddler who hates mushy food, a vegan aunt who just showed up unannounced, and 20 minutes before you have to log on to a call.
And you just have random pantry items to work with.
Right. Now, if you ask the coder what to do, it would just print out an inventory list of your fridge. Raw data. If you ask the detective, it would look at your past stressful Tuesdays and tell you to order a pizza, which fails because of the vegan ant.
But the artist does something completely different. You give it those constraints, and it synthesizes a brand new recipe for crispy broccoli bites that actually solves the problem.
It is a profound capability. But, and this is where we have to issue a massive warning, it comes with a massive cost. You are paying 5 cents or more per query. And worse, you are walking into the fragility trap.
The fragility trap. This is what organizations are completely failing to understand right now. Let's break down prompt rot first. What is the maintenance tax?
Prompt rot is the silent killer of enterprise AI systems. When you build your core workflows on top of the artist, you are building on shifting sand. These models are constantly being updated by their developers.
So the mathematical pathways inside the model are physically changing over time.
Absolutely. Which means a perfectly engineered prompt that gave you a flawless, highly accurate summary last week might suddenly produce absolute garbage today. The linguistic weights have shifted.
So you are basically forced to pay this endless maintenance tax. You have to constantly weed and adjust your prompts just to stop the system from degrading.
It is exhausting.
Okay.
And it leads right into the second major trap, the hallucination problem, the soap cookies.
I am obsessed with this term, soap cookies. Explain how this happens.
Well, the artist is, by design, a vibe engine. During its training, it is rewarded for conversational flow. It is taught to sound helpful, authoritative, and articulate. But it is not strictly grounded in factual truth.
It prioritizes the flow of the conversation over the accuracy of the data.
Yes, so when it encounters a gap in its knowledge, it doesn't just halt and throw an error like the coder would.
Yeah.
It improvises. It generates an answer that is formatted beautifully and written eloquently.
It looks like a perfectly baked, delicious cookie.
But when you actually test the facts, when you take a bite, it is made of soap. It is completely hollow and potentially very toxic to your business logic.
So let me just summarize this reality check. We are paying a massive premium of 5 cents a query. We are constantly battling prompt rot, and we are risking feeding our clients literal soap cookies all just to avoid doing a free keyword search.
That is the exact trap the insurance company fell into. They treated a math test like a creation test. And that is why survival in this space requires the architect's mandate.
The architect's mandate. This is the synthesis of the whole framework. How do we actually apply this decision matrix to build insulated systems?
It comes down to ownership. If you are just paping questions into a prompt box, you are a customer. But if you use the matrix to direct traffic, you become an architect. You have to insulate your workflows.
Meaning, you architect the system so that simple math never, ever hits the expensive artist.
Precisely. You do not let the coder handle the conversational vibes,
Right.
and you strictly forbid the artist from handling the math. Let me give you the overarching mandate. Running cost is a lagging indicator of lazy engineering.
Oh wow, running cost is a lagging indicator of lazy engineering. That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
It is the absolute truth. The magic is never the model itself. It is the orchestration.
I want to go back to that home cook's journey because it beautifully illustrates this orchestration. It shows how the 3 tiers work together in a properly designed system.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so you are in your kitchen. First, you run a coder query. You check a smart sensor on your fridge. The sensor uses plain fixed logic. If the milk carton weighs less than 10 grams, it returns a binary answer. Out of milk. Absolute truth, 0 cost.
Perfect. That is the math test passed.
Then you move to a detective query. You ask the system, when will I run out of eggs? The machine learning model analyzes your last 6 months of breakfast habits. It cross-references the days you eat cereal versus the days you fry eggs, and it predicts, you will run out of eggs by Tuesday. It costs a fraction of a cent.
That is the habit test. Inference applied perfectly.
And finally, you hit a wall. You have 2 eggs, some milk, and that picky kid who hates mushy food. Neither the coder nor the detective can cook for you. So you run an artist query, you give it those constraints, and it generates the crunchy bread crust fingers recipe.
That is true architecture. Now, imagine if that insurance company had used that exact same flow.
Right. Let's map it to the corporate world. For the coder step, they just use a simple script to scan the documents and flag any file containing the number 24.
Instant, free, 100% accurate. Then, they use the detective to analyze 5 years of historical claims data. This predicts which of those newly migrated policies are most likely to result in a claim next quarter.
Which lets them staff their call centers efficiently.
Exactly. And then, and only then, do they use the artist. When a customer files a highly complex edge case claim that requires a nuanced, custom-written response letter explaining the policy limits.
They architect the system to protect the budget and guarantee accuracy. If you just route every single question to the artist, you are trading reliability for hype.
You are trading real efficiency for the mere illusion of intelligence. Master the matrix or keep paying for the world's most expensive GPUs.
So basically, Gen AI is that one intern. Zero experience, but the confidence of a CEO after 3 espressos.
That is a very apt description. But before we wrap up, I want to pivot slightly. Because mastering this matrix is about more than just corporate budgets. It actually raises a very provocative question about ourselves.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, we have spent this entire show talking about how organizations burn resources by using the artist to do the coder's job. But think about your own brain.
Okay, I am intrigued.
In a world where we increasingly outsource our daily thinking to generative AI, where we use it to summarize long documents, graph difficult emails, or plan our schedules, are we slowly losing our own internal skills?
Wow, that is a heavy thought.
If we constantly rely on an external artist to interpret reality for us, what happens to our own ability to simply check the math? What happens to our internal detective? Are we losing our capacity to look at the bent grass on the trail and infer the truth for ourselves?
That is genuinely unsettling. If we outsource all our judgment to a vibe engine, we might actually lose the discipline to recognize an unshakable truth when we see one.
It is something every listener should seriously mull over. The magic isn't the model, it's the architect, knowing when to hire the artist and when to just check the math.
Hit that subscribe button, join the Catalyst in the Cup. See you in the next one. Bye for now.